Hello colleagues, I'm Dr. Joby Lawrence from the Iowa Department of Education. I'm the Title III Director, and I'm really happy to be here today to have a conversation with all of you about LAU planning. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you for your time and attention to this very important conversation. And we're going to start off with some basic information about LAU plans, and then we're going to have a session of Q&A. I want to just start by reading a quote from Robert Slavin from 1996, in which he says, "Every child can learn. Every school can ensure the success of every child." Statements to this effect appear in goal statements, commission reports, school district offices, and they're posted in school buildings and appear as mottos on school stationery. But does our education system really behave as if this were true? I would say if we took a really hard look at our own systems, that we might be challenged to answer the question yes. Just to give you a couple of examples, in recent weeks I've been out in a lot of districts for monitoring visits and spent some time with teachers, with students, with parents, and with administrators. And as recently as last week, I was visiting with some high school students and talking to them about college and career readiness and asking them what their plans after high school were. And I was really disappointed to find out that not one EL student in that district had ever been approached about college opportunities. And when I asked specifically what their counselors were telling them, they said they're not hearing anything, not about careers, not about anything after high school. And so I was very disappointed to find out that the high school kids who are English language learners were not getting the same information and access to the same equal opportunities that other students were receiving in the district. Another example would be where I walked into a classroom of third graders and the teacher came to meet me at the door and she recognized me from the department. And she wanted to just warn me right away that I wouldn't see her best instruction because she was working with the low kids today. She had the ELL small group instruction. And while I understand what she was trying to communicate was that in her estimation of the way she adapted her teaching for English language learners, she was messaging that she had very low expectations for EL students. And I was very concerned about that message, not only for what that meant to the adults in the building, but what students were picking up on in terms of how they felt about themselves as learners. So in response to meeting students' needs through the LAU plan, I want to just share briefly where we've been. Over the last 3 years, we've been working really hard at the State Department to make sure that the LAU planning process became a living, breathing action plan and not just a document that was put together by districts and then dusted off on a shelf when someone came to visit you for accreditation. We really do want to make sure folks understand it's grounded in federal law, civil rights law, and certainly being heavily monitored currently by OCR and DOJ, which stand respectively for the Office of Civil Rights and Department of Justice. I do want to say, first and foremost, that we positively presupposition our conversation today. I do believe that everyone in the state has been doing the best they can with the information that they've had, and over the years we've been working really hard to make sure that our guidance is clear and consistent around LAU planning, and that people do understand that the LAU plan is meant to be an action plan and not a compliance document. So the LAU plan is grounded in a landmark civil rights decision in 1974. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled on behalf of Chinese students who sued the San Francisco Unified School District that equal treatment is not equitable, that there's nothing more unfair than treating all students the same. And the district was required to start offering specialized programming for students who were not proficient in English. What the law stops short of saying is what that specialized programming should look like. And so districts were very inconsistent in what they were putting forth for English language learners after Lau versus Nichols was ruled on in 1974. And Castaneda versus Pickard was a court case that helped to clarify what specialized instruction should look like. And basically, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Castaneda versus Pickard, the Mexican-American children and their parents, in 1978. And there were 3 prongs that came out of that ruling that help us understand what specialized language instruction education programs should look like. 1 is it must be based on sound educational theory. 2, it must be implemented effectively and with adequate resources and personnel. And after a trial period, it must be evaluated as effective in overcoming language barriers. So those 2 very important court cases are really the foundation for LAU planning. and need to be considered as we look at our programs and evaluate whether or not we're really meeting the needs of English language learners and their families. You might also be aware that on January 7th of 2015, a letter was issued jointly by the Office of Civil Rights and Department of Justice and sent to every school superintendent across the United States. And that letter defined very clearly what expectations were around serving English language learners, and it also pointed out many of the citations that they'd recently been issuing districts in hopes that they could help districts think through responses and be able to provide some additional federal guidance around what's expected for English language learners. What does that mean for our state? I would just like to point out that both OCR and DOJ are very active currently. I get calls on a regular basis from both OCR and the Department of Justice asking questions on policies and procedures at the state level and asking how we're monitoring those at the LEA level and what LEAs are doing to respond to those. So I think it serves as a reminder to pay very close attention to the current state of compliance at both the SEA and LEA level and understand that compliance is the minimal bar of service for kids. And if we're not meeting compliance, then we're certainly not meeting students' needs. So in closing, I would just like to share a thought from Ron Edmonds in where he says, "We can, wherever and whenever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to do that. Whether or not we do it must finally depend on how we feel about the fact that we have not so far."